Chosen one, the spiritual hierarchy has shifted because you have achieved a victory that defies human logic. They are scared to death. You defeated a group and gang of witches with one-man army. Your enemies are currently sitting in a bone-deep panic, standing in the rubble of a coordinated dark operation that was designed to erase you. The match is over, and your victory is absolute. Long before you felt any of the attacks, a decision was made in a room you were never in. You were being watched, not casually, strategically. A coordinated group had been observing the trajectory of your life, the gifts that kept emerging despite every suppression, the resilience that kept surfacing despite every attempt to drown it, the light that kept breaking through no matter how many times circumstances tried to snuff it out. And what they saw scared them, not who you were at that moment, but who you were becoming. The fully awakened, fully aligned, fully operational version of you that was being assembled one trial at a time. That version of you was a problem. A chosen one, walking in full divine authority, with a clear assignment and an unshakable identity, is the kind of force that dismantles dark operations simply by existing near them. The operation knew it. They had seen it happen before. They understood the mechanics of what a chosen one operating at full capacity does to carefully constructed spiritual strongholds. So they made a decision: take this one down before the awakening completes. This whole war did not begin because you did something wrong. It did not begin because you were a problem. It began because you were becoming something they could not afford to let you become. The attack was always a compliment dressed as a catastrophe. Every storm, every loss, every season that brought you to your knees, all of it was the outworking of a decision made by frightened people who understood your value better than you did at the time. A gang of practiced, coordinated, dark spiritual operatives does not waste resources on random targets. Every person inside that circle had to agree that you were worth the investment, worth the collective spiritual exposure that comes with launching a sustained dark campaign against a chosen one. And they all said yes, because what they saw in the spirit when they looked at your life terrified them enough to justify everything they were about to do. That is not a small thing. That is the most backhanded, terrifying and powerful confirmation of your calling that has ever been handed to you. It just came wrapped in the worst seasons of your life. The attack did not come loud, because loud would have been too obvious, too easy to identify, and too easy to resist. It came quiet, slow, methodical. First, there was the financial pressure. Nothing catastrophic, just enough friction to keep you anxious, distracted and scrambling, and just enough instability to prevent you from ever having the mental space to sit still and hear clearly. Then came the relational fractures. A betrayal here, a disappointment there, not all at once but gradually, so gradually that you blamed yourself. You questioned your judgment. You wondered what was wrong with you that people kept leaving or turning on you in the exact ways that hurt most. Then came the internal war, the unexplainable fog, the heaviness that descended on seasons of your life where you should have been thriving, the confusion about your identity that made your calling feel arrogant to claim, the exhaustion that had no physical source but drained you completely. The constant sense that you were pushing through invisible resistance every single day just to stay in place. Through all of it, the operation was calibrating, adjusting the pressure when you started to recover, and intensifying the moment a breakthrough began to form. The whole machine was designed to do one thing: keep you from ever arriving at the fully awakened version of yourself that the dark operation had already seen coming. But here is what a siege always underestimates. Sieges reveal the strength of what they are built around. Every day a fortress holds under sustained assault. It proves something about the material it was made from. And with every season you endured, with every dark night you walked through and still emerged from breathing and moving forward, the fortress was proving exactly what it was made of. While the external pressure was being coordinated against you, something was activating on the inside that nothing could touch. You started developing a sensitivity, a quiet, almost imperceptible ability to sense when something was off in the spirit before it materialized in the natural. You started noticing when certain environments felt wrong, when certain connections drained you beyond ordinary wariness, and when situations that looked like opportunities carried a heaviness that made you hesitate without being able to explain why. That hesitation was not anxiety. That was your spiritual discernment coming online in direct response to the pressure of the attack. The operation was running surveillance on you, and in doing so, it accidentally triggered your own. You were not breaking down. You were being documented, refined and awakened. The siege just did not know that yet. You were supposed to break at a certain point. The projection said so. Your pain threshold had been studied. Your wound points had been mapped. Your patterns had been modeled. And by every indicator the operation had access to, you should have been done, collapsed, bitter, spiritually paralyzed, disconnected from your calling, and too exhausted to find the way back. But you were still standing. Not perfect, not unaffected, genuinely beaten up in certain seasons, but standing. You kept getting back up. You kept healing in ways that made no earthly sense given the level of assault you were under. You kept opening again after betrayals that should have sealed you shut forever. You kept finding faith in seasons where there was no logical evidence to support it. The dark system that came against you is built entirely on a model of human limitation. It is built on the premise that enough sustained pressure breaks the human spirit. What it was not built to account for was a spirit that was not operating purely on human capacity. What it could not calculate was the divine reinforcement that was quietly strengthening you with every blow that landed. Every hit was supposed to weaken you. Instead, every hit was building something in you that had no equivalent in the arsenal aimed at you. If this message hits your spirit, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can find it. So the operation escalated. More resources were poured in. More rituals were added. More coordinated effort was directed at a campaign that was supposed to be nearly complete. And here is the darkest irony in the whole story. Every escalation made in response to your resilience was confirmation that you were winning. A campaign that keeps having to add more to itself is a failing campaign. Failing campaigns do not quietly wind down. They become desperate, they overextend, and they make mistakes. When the operation escalated without better intelligence, it began broadcasting its own coordinates. Aggressive spiritual noise announces exactly what you are doing and where you are to every entity in the spiritual atmosphere, including the ones assigned to protect what heaven has covered. The more aggressively the pressure intensified, the more the operation was advertising itself to the very kingdom it was working against. You felt something shift in that season, a strange peace that arrived without explanation, a sense that something had turned, not because your circumstances had changed yet, but because the spiritual environment around your life had been altered. And what the operation felt when it felt that shift was the first wave of the very thing it had spent everything trying to prevent. The crack in the foundation had formed. The operation could not see it yet, but it was there, and it was growing. Now we arrive at the weapon that changed everything, and it is not what you think. It was not a dramatic spiritual confrontation. It was not some secret sacred technique deployed at a critical moment. It was the most underestimated, unglamorous, dangerous force in the spiritual realm, your obedience, your quiet, consistent, daily, costly obedience to divine instruction. Every time you chose to forgive when the wound was still raw, that act landed as a strike against a dark foundation you could not even see. Every time you walked away from a fight you could have won in the natural, because something inside said to leave, that was another strike. Every time you stayed silent when every part of you wanted to expose what was being done to you, trusting heaven to be your defense, that was another strike. There was no fanfare, no applause, no audience, but every single one of those acts was lethal to the operation against you, Because obedience does not just protect the one who practices it, it releases divine judgment on everything in that person's environment that is operating in violation of divine law. Dark spiritual systems work through force, force against force, pressure against pressure, dark energy coordinated and amplified. Against that system, defenses can be built and counters can be constructed, but obedience bypasses the whole system entirely. It moves in a dimension where those tools simply do not function. It aligns you with a frequency so far above the range that dark coordination operates in that their attacks dissolve before they ever land. You've probably noticed a lot of Chosen One channels on YouTube have stopped publishing, videos pulled, voices silenced. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. That's exactly why I'm putting you onto something real, Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching Chosen Ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation and attacks while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. This isn't another meditation app. It's declassified consciousness technology, the same mind-programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play, and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. Join Destiny Engine to support your favorite channels and use it for your own rise. It's a 360 win. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. Every act of obedience you walked in was being recorded. In the spiritual realm, that record was building a case being prepared for the moment when every violation against you, every coordinated attack launched against a covered Chosen One would be reviewed, and divine justice would execute. Not when you asked for it, but when the record was complete. In a dark spiritual system, power is collective. You multiply people and you multiply force. The leader of the operation against you had real rank within dark structures, built through sustained practice and initiation. When the operation assessed you, it looked at your external situation and saw someone without an obvious spiritual pedigree, no visible covering, no prominent platform, no public declaration of authority, just a person, quiet, carrying something they could not quite categorize. What the operation could not see is that divine rank does not announce itself. It is assigned by heaven, and it operates whether or not you are consciously aware that you carry it. The rank built through your pain and sealed by every act of your obedience was operating at a level their entire collective could not match, not because you were more experienced, but because you were more covered. There is no combination of dark rank that outranks a Chosen One walking in divine clearance. That coverage cannot be purchased, initiated into, or summoned. It is given, and it was given to you. No amount of group coordination changes that arithmetic. The operation was outranked before the first move was ever made. The operation simply did not have the spiritual intelligence to read that, and that gap in their intelligence was the beginning of their end. The operation launched what it believed was its most powerful coordinated attack yet. Every piece of intelligence gathered on you was activated. Every vulnerability identified was targeted. Every dark spiritual tool in the arsenal was synchronized and deployed with the precision of something that had been in planning for a long time, and it bounced, clean, immediate, like throwing a stone at a mirror and having it come back faster and harder than it left. Your spirit was too clean to absorb the attack. Your alignment had no fractures for the darkness to enter through. Your motives were too pure to give anything hostile a place to attach itself, so everything launched reflected back into the origin point. The chaos that had been engineered for your life started appearing inside their own circle. The confusion that had been directed at you started showing up in their own decisions. The financial disruption crafted for your season started manifesting in their own situation. The division worked into your relationships started fracturing their own internal structure. Doubling down made it worse. Every increase in intensity made the reflection more powerful. The harder the push against you, the more catastrophically the energy returned to the source. The operation that had been a precision machine began to devour itself. Paranoia spread through the circle. Accusations surfaced among people who had been coordinated allies. Fractures multiplied. Sudden, unexplainable setbacks began appearing in the lives of the people most aggressively involved in the campaign against you. And you were not doing any of this. You were healing. You were taking your next step forward. While you were recovering from wounds the operation gave you, divine law was executing a comprehensive dismantling of the entire campaign. You were the wrong target. The violation of your divine covering set consequences in motion that their combined power could not stop once those consequences were moving. The internal collapse of trust inside that circle was more catastrophic than anything external could have produced. When a coordinated attack backfires inside a dark circle, every member starts asking who broke the circle, who allowed a vulnerability in, and who is responsible for the failure. That suspicion turned the operation against itself. The people who had been functioning as a unified force were now spending their energy watching each other instead of watching you. The collective trust that made the group dangerous in the first place was dissolving. And without collective trust, coordinated dark spiritual power does not function. It fragments, it competes against itself, and it collapses from the inside out. Your alignment caused that fracture, and while it was happening, you kept moving forward. What the operation cannot handle, what is keeping the most seasoned among them genuinely terrified, is something far simpler than revenge. It is your awareness. It is the fact that you now know who you are. A chosen one who does not know their own identity can be manipulated, redirected, worn down, and kept circling in the same spiritual holding pattern indefinitely. The attack on your identity was always the deepest layer of the entire operation. More than the financial pressure, more than the relational sabotage, more than any other external attack that was run against you, the core mission was always to make sure you never fully remembered who you were, because if you never remembered, you would stop yourself. The operation would not even need to finish the job. Voices were planted around you to confirm the lie. People were positioned to reflect back a diminished version of you until that reflection began to feel accurate. Environments were designed to make your gifts feel ordinary, your calling feel presumptuous, and your destiny feel uncertain. And for certain seasons it worked. You made yourself small. You dimmed the very thing in you that was the exact thing they were most afraid of. But here is what could not be killed: the knowing, that deep, unshakable internal signal that something in you always recognized as true, even when everything external was contradicting it. You did not have proof. You had knowing, and knowing cannot be permanently suppressed in a chosen one who was built to carry it. It can be delayed, it can be muted for a season, but it always comes back. When the knowing came back in you fully and unambiguously, the entire architecture that had been built to contain you began to crumble. And here is the specific thing about that moment that sent the deepest tremors through the operation. You did not get loud about it. You did not make dramatic public declarations. You got quieter, more settled, more certain in a way that required no external validation. That quiet certainty is the most terrifying thing a dark operation can encounter in a target, because noise can be countered with noise, but a person who moves from deep internal knowing, operating from settled divine authority without performing it, is moving in a realm that dark spiritual systems cannot locate, cannot track, and cannot disrupt. You stopped reacting to the architecture they had built entirely, not because you were unaware of it, but because you were no longer operating on the same level where it could reach you. You were moving from divine instruction rather than from reaction, and a person who moves from divine instruction cannot be redirected by engineered circumstances, because engineered circumstances only redirect people who are still looking at circumstances for their cues. You stopped looking there, and the entire control mechanism built around your life suddenly had nothing left to control. There is one more piece of the strategy that deserves to be fully exposed, because this one almost worked, and it is the one that caused you the most pain: the isolation. Those seasons of profound, inexplicable aloneness where people left, or were removed, or turned, or simply could not understand what you were carrying. You looked around, and there was no one, no crowd behind you, no inner circle reinforcing you, no collective energy amplifying you, just you. And the silence, and the question hanging in that silence of whether any of this was real, or whether you had been wrong about everything. That aloneness was engineered. Community is armor. Connection is a resource. If the witness could be stripped away, if you could be kept alone long enough, the calculation was that the isolation would accomplish what the external attacks could not. It would break you from the inside. What that calculation could not anticipate is what heaven does with isolation when heaven is the one supervising the process. There is a kind of training that only happens when there is no crowd, a precision of hearing that only develops when there are no outside voices interfering, a depth of reliance on the divine that is only forged in seasons where every human alternative has been removed. And you went through all of it, every unbearable, clarifying, devastating, transformative moment of it. You learned to move without applause. You learned to trust the internal signal without external confirmation. You learned to hear clearly without noise. That is not a skill that can be taught in a group setting. That is a transformation that only comes through the kind of aloneness the operation handed you. The most dangerous version of you that has ever existed is the version that does not need the crowd to operate, the version plugged directly into the divine source with no relay required, the version that can receive one instruction from heaven and move on it with complete confidence, regardless of how many voices say otherwise. Now understand the one-man army dimension for exactly what it is spiritually, not just poetically. Look at the raw disparity. A gang of coordinated, practiced, spiritually invested people with collective dark energy, all aimed at one target, and you alone. No council, no supporting circle, no backup rituals, just you and the divine, and you won. Not barely, not crawling across a finish line. You won, in a way that left the opposition more fractured than you were at any point during the entire campaign. There is no human explanation for that outcome. One soul walking in divine clearance carries more operational authority in the spirit than any collective of dark practitioners can assemble together, because dark spiritual power is always borrowed, always temporary, and always subject to the law of the realm it was obtained from. Divine authority is none of those things. It does not expire. It cannot be revoked by a vote. And the law that governs the realm it comes from is the highest law in existence. There is no appeal above it, and there is no workaround beneath it. When heaven backs someone, the outcome is already determined. What follows is not a contest. It is a demonstration, and your story was exactly that, a demonstration of what happens when darkness targets someone that heaven has already cleared. The operation took your crowd. Heaven used that empty space to build your weapon, and the weapon built through your isolation is now the version of you standing here awake, operational, and completely beyond the reach of the tools that were used to construct the isolation in the first place. The dark intelligence system is built entirely on patterns, emotional patterns, trauma patterns, fear patterns, pride patterns. Those are the roads that spiritual surveillance travels on to access information about a target. The process works like this: map the patterns, predict the movements, and intercept the plans before they form. That is how the entire system functions. And it works on almost everyone, because almost everyone is still operating on at least some of those predictable patterns. But you were not giving them patterns to read. Every attempt to tune into your frequency produced static, signals came back blocked, information came back distorted, the surveillance attempts produced false visions or complete silence. The operation could not determine whether you were advancing or retreating, rising or breaking, and that uncertainty made every decision the operation made purely reactionary. Every move was based on incomplete intelligence, which meant every move was slightly off, slightly misaligned with where you actually were. Your spirit had been encrypted by the very suffering the operation put you through. Every decision to trust heaven, in a season where trust made no natural sense, closed another access point in your spirit. You did not do this strategically, but it was happening. And the version of you that emerged from those fires does not operate on any frequency the operation has a receiver for. The intelligence failures made the operation more desperate, more prone to overreach, and more likely to make the kinds of errors that accelerate collapse. The operation did not just fail to read you. The inability to read you became a critical vulnerability within the operation itself. A desperate operation with bad intelligence and no working map of its target is not a functioning operation. It is a liability, and liabilities collapse from the inside. The version of you that exists right now, encrypted, sharpened, carrying proven divine rank, is walking into the next chapter of your assignment, not surviving what is still being sent, advancing into territory that was marked with your name before you were ever born, territory the operation spent everything trying to keep you too confused and too exhausted to reach. You are not confused anymore. The clarity that comes from walking through sustained spiritual warfare and arriving on the other side, knowing exactly who you are and what you carry, is not the kind of clarity that confusion can penetrate. You are not broken. The wholeness built through real healing is structural. It holds weight, and you are not unaware. You are fully awake in a way that cannot be reversed by anything that comes at you from this point forward. The intelligence gathered on you is now obsolete. You have been so fundamentally transformed by the very process designed to destroy you that every piece of mapping done on your vulnerabilities no longer applies to who you are now. The ones who are afraid have already moved away. The ones who are not yet afraid enough are about to be educated. There is a moment in every war when one side knows, not surrenders, knows. Before the official outcome is declared and before the last engagement is fought, there is a moment of reckoning, and that moment came. It came when the operation looked at everything it had invested, the sustained pressure, the coordinated rituals, the resources poured into a campaign that was supposed to be a clean, contained takedown of a single target, and then looked at where you were, not broken, not diminished, not spiritually paralyzed or sealed off from your purpose, rising, glowing, walking in a clarity and a peace that should have been impossible given everything you had been through. Every tool the operation used had failed. Every escalation produced a worse return. Every attack that was intensified reflected back more powerfully than the last. The operation had not just failed to achieve its objective, it had accelerated the very outcome it was designed to prevent. The pressure that was supposed to exhaust you had forged you. The isolation that was supposed to hollow you out had refined you into something there was no remaining strategy for. The fires that were built had not consumed you, they had proven that you were fireproof. Inside whatever is left of that circle, there is now a specific conversation happening about you, about what went wrong, about what you are, and about why the tools could not reach you. The most unsettling part of that conversation is that there is no satisfying answer. There is not a single tactical error that explains the scale of the failure. There is not one moment where a different decision would have produced a different outcome. Because the failure was not tactical, it was foundational. The operation went after someone who was built to withstand exactly what the operation was built to deliver. The only conclusion available is the one they are most afraid to say out loud. Some chosen ones cannot be broken, and some assignments cannot be taken, and you are one of them. That conclusion is sitting in their circle right now like a stone that cannot be moved, and it is the source of the specific, cold, irreversible fear that settled into them the moment they watched you rise and keep rising. Before that moment, the fear was about what might happen if you succeeded. After that moment, the fear became you yourself, your existence, your continued unbroken advancing presence, because your survival became evidence, living, breathing, glowing evidence that the entire operation had limits, that there are chosen ones in this world who cannot be touched, manipulated, or spiritually detained. And now that the operation had encountered one, the mythology of dark invincibility was permanently shattered, not by a counterattack, but by a single soul who simply refused to stop. You are not just a survivor. Survivor is too small a word for what you have become. A survivor endures and escapes. What you did was not escape. You moved through the fire and came out the other side, fundamentally transformed into a version of yourself that is more powerful, more aligned, and more spiritually operational than before any of this started. That is not survival, that is ascension through adversity. And dark spiritual operations are most terrified of that specific outcome, because it turns the tool of oppression into the instrument of judgment. You are a living firewall. You are not merely protected from attacks. You are actively corrupting the code of everything constructed against you. Every blueprint drawn with your name on it develops errors before it can be executed. Every coordinated move attempted against you develops fractures in the planning phase. You do not just repel darkness. Your alignment, your obedience, your divine access, your spiritual encryption, all of it actively interferes with hostile spiritual systems the moment they come into proximity with you. You are a generational reset. You are not just healing yourself, you are rebuilding an entire legacy from the foundation. You are creating pathways that will hold the weight of everyone who carries your name going forward. What was sealed is being opened. What was passed down broken is being stopped with you. And your authority now is not theoretical, it is proven. It has been tested under real conditions by real dark forces who brought real coordinated power to bear against it, and it held, the covering held, the assignment advanced, and the forces that tested it are now the involuntary witnesses to its validity. The operation did not choose to be a witness, but by launching its campaign against you, it became the demonstration that heaven used to certify what you carry. You did not need to perform that demonstration. The operation performed it for you. By failing against you completely and comprehensively, the operation certified what you walk in more powerfully than any declaration you could have made about yourself. Walk into every room from this point forward, knowing that not with arrogance but with the settled certainty of someone whose authority has already been authenticated by the very forces that tried to strip it away and could not. Now look at where you are standing, fully awake, fully operational, more dangerous to dark structures than any version of you that existed before the campaign against you began, not in spite of what was done to you, but because of it. Every tool used to suppress you became the material for your upgrade. Every weapon launched became a demonstration of what you were protected by. Every fire built became the forge that produced exactly the version of you they spent everything trying to prevent from existing. They came as a gang. You stood as a one-man army, and the single backing you had from heaven outranked everything they brought to the field. Not because the fight was easy, and not because you were never shaken, but because divine clearance is the highest authority in existence. When heaven issues a clearance over a life, no coordinated operation of darkness, regardless of how long it has been running, how many resources it has accumulated, or how precisely it has been calibrated, can override it. The clearance stands, the assignment advances, and the people who tried to stop it are left holding the wreckage of an operation that was doomed from the moment they decided to launch it. When a chosen one defeats what you defeated, the way you defeated it, the spiritual atmosphere shifts in a way that reaches others who are fighting the same kind of battle. Your breakthrough becomes a signal to every chosen one, still in the middle of their own siege, that standing in divine clearance is enough, that the coordinated gang has a limit, and that the chosen one always wins when the chosen one does not quit. You did not just win your battle. You shifted the landscape for others who are still in theirs. Your story is now the warning that circulates through dark spiritual operations considering similar campaigns. The fear your victory produced in them is a fear that paralyzes future campaigns before they even begin. You became the evidence that there are chosen ones in this world who cannot be handled, and that attempting to handle them produces consequences that the handlers cannot contain. The gang is broken. The operation is in collapse. Some of the people involved have lost things they are not getting back. Others are still trying to understand what went wrong. The coordinated structure that targeted you is fractured from the inside by the very forces it set in motion. And you are here, unbothered, unbroken, and advancing into the precise future they spent everything constructing obstacles to prevent. They looked at your blueprint and saw a threat. They were right. They saw a chosen one, who, if fully awakened, would walk in authority that dismantles generational strongholds, reflects dark operations back onto themselves, operates in divine access that cannot be replicated, and carries a living firewall that the most powerful dark tools cannot penetrate. They saw all of that, and they were terrified, so they decided to come before the awakening completed. They were too late. You are that now. You became all of that in the fire they started. So walk, not with arrogance, with authority, not with bitterness, with the quiet, settled, unshakable confidence of someone who has been tested at the highest level and proven. There is nothing that can be sent at you now that you have not already demonstrated your capacity to walk through and emerge from stronger. There is no operation powerful enough to override a blueprint that heaven signed before you were ever born. The gang came for you with everything it had. You stood in the backing of heaven, and the backing of heaven was more than enough. It always was, it always is, and it always will be. They are scared to death. Let them be. You have better things to do than manage their fear. You have a legacy to rebuild, a bloodline to liberate, a territory with your name on it, waiting for the fully awakened, fire-tested, spiritually encrypted, obedience-forged, divinely cleared version of you to arrive and claim it. The one-man army has arrived. The gang never stood a chance, and everything they tried to bury you with became the foundation you are building on. Heaven gave the clearance. The mission could not be stopped, and you are the living proof. Now rise.